Hollow Knight is the massively popular Metroidvania Souls-like platformer who has become a poster child for the indie gaming scene. Now, I have never played Hollow Knight, and I don't actually know a whole lot about it. I've seen footage from people playing it here and there, but I haven't seen anything that I'd consider a spoiler. Just some combat, a location or two, a few NPCs, and the main hometown, Dirtmouth. So today I'm going to bring you through my experience with the game as I do a blind run of one of Steam's most beloved games. Spoilers ahead if somehow you haven't played this game either. When I started the game, I actually found myself a bit perplexed right off the bat because I wasn't moving.
Here we are. Epic. Tried Hollow Knight for the first time. Right now, we are apparently frozen in place. I cannot move, is all I know.
I'm playing the game on mouse and keyboard, and I had my hands ready to use WSD keys for movement and the mouse for other actions, but that's not how Hollow Knight works. So after looking at the control scheme, I finally figured out how to move.
Oh!
Not the greatest sign considering this game is called the Souls-like of Metroidvanias, but alright. I have also heard that a controller is best for Hollow Knight, but I didn't grow up using a controller, so I'm not very used to them, so it just felt more comfortable using a PC, and as I learned, I think that was a good decision. You're introduced to a few mechanics before you come to the hub town of Dirtmouth, and after jumping down a hole, you officially start the game in the first area, the Forgotten Crossroads. This is where I've seen the most footage of Hollow Knight, and honestly, at the time of playing, I thought this was the general aesthetic for every part of the game. I had no idea there'd be such a wide variety of locations with different appearances, with each one being as beautiful as the next. Now, Hollow Knight makes you earn the right to have a map, but thankfully they make access to the first one pretty simple. So I got my map and opened it up to see a bunch of locations I don't recognize and no idea where I am on it. Turns out you need to go to the shop where my favorite piece of dialogue is. And then buy the Wayward Compass and equip it if you want to see yourself, which is kind of mean, but I guess rewards you for returning to the game and being familiar enough with it to not need a map. Now that we have our bearings, let's start skipping around a bit and start talking about my thoughts as I go through this journey. I found starting out this game to be pretty difficult. Full disclosure, I did play this game for maybe 10 or 20 minutes once before, but I didn't find it all that interesting or entertaining and stopped playing. You can grab your pitchforks and torches if you want, but those were my honest thoughts when I was first exposed to the game. At the time, I did have a little twinkling of starting this channel, so maybe that also played a role in it since I didn't have a good setup for recording the gameplay. But I think I found the incredibly precise movements and lack of immediate direction a bit daunting. And if I were to speak very frankly, I might have actually stopped playing once again if I weren't making a video on it. And I think it's just because I didn't have an immediate objective. I was just wandering around killing bugs for no particular reason. I had no understanding of what the game even was, so much so that when I first died, I didn't even know what that meant. I just spawned back at the bench and didn't even glance at the little soul container thing, so I didn't even notice there was a problem. I returned to the same spot since that's generally a good first step after dying, and the little ghost guy kind of freaked me out.
It's finally attacking up.
This isn't a critique, I thought it was cool. I just think it helps illustrate just how little I understood what was going on. As I explored, things did get a bit more interesting though. I found one of those trapped worm guys and I couldn't free him, which I think is a war crime. If you are capable of saving one of these worms and don't, then you should probably be put in an asylum or something because you are an actual sociopath. These guys are so cute, I just love them. I ran into my first mini-boss of the run.
Oh, no. I'm not ready for, oh.
Although maybe he's not a mini-boss and just a tough enemy, I don't know. Of course, I died on the first encounter, but I actually felt fine about it. It was a bit of a shock, but I love a good fight in games, so this actually got me a bit more excited about it. Bosses are something I'm going to rave about later in this video, but for now, this big old beetle guy whet my appetite for what this game had in store. Although I guess learning how to take down this guy is what brought me to the first boss I encountered, the False Knight. This guy was pretty simple, and the beetle you get past to get here teaches you some of the keys to taking him down.
Oh, and he goes shockwave. Okay, run away and then jump. All right. What the heck?
That didn't prevent me from dying in my first fight against him.
No. Okay, back up. Let it come. Okay. Oh no!
But that loss didn't keep me from coming back to this boss fight and taking him down the second time.
Alright, game. Okay, this should be the final one, right? Come on. Die. Okay, we got one more heart back. Oh! Oh. Buddy? Buddy? Oh! I feel kind of sorry for him, alright.
And upon killing the knight, I suddenly feel a lot more guilty because the little guy looks a lot more cute outside the armor than inside. I suppose, though, this might actually be just a good time to talk about the bosses as a whole. They were, after all, what I found to be far and away the best part of the game. I've been thinking a lot about boss design as of late, trying to think about what makes a good boss battle, and Hollow Knight has given me a lot to consider. These bosses were beautifully simple and yet incredibly rewarding. They won't knock you on your butt and outright bully you like Souls-likes are known for doing. In fact, there were very few bosses who took more than 3 tries, and I think most of them took maybe 2. But with that said, they still felt pretty difficult. Every boss had maybe 3 or 4 different attacks that you'd have to be aware of and prepared to dodge, and each attack is very well telegraphed. This means I could quickly learn what the pattern was and start thinking of ways to counter it. I find a few things more frustrating than a boss fight, in particular difficult ones, where the telegraphing is or is almost non-existent. These kinds of fights feel like nothing more than praying for victory as opposed to a well-fought fight. Then there's boss fights that rely entirely on spewing forth a million projectiles or going stupidly fast to increase difficulty. In Hollow Knight, there really aren't a whole lot of projectiles for most bosses. There's also the classic second phase that most bosses have in games. Many times these second phases will be like an entirely new boss fight or rely on a different gimmick than the first half. Although this isn't necessarily wrong, it can sometimes be very frustrating because if you've mastered the first phase but not the second one, then the first phase can feel like an unnecessary obstacle to you learning how to actually finish the boss. Hollow Knight, however, doesn't have second phases like this. Rather than changing the entire fight, the second phase can be summed up with, what if first phase was faster? They might shoot a few more projectiles or have 1 or 2 new attacks, but instead of being thrown into an entirely new fight, you are instead expected to prove your mastery of the first part by doing it again, but with higher precision and greater speed. This also made the first phase never feel like a waste because it helped muscle memory and helped you train for the second phase. There was also a need to think a few steps ahead. And that first phase would also be your opportunity to potentially learn a new strategy or figure out that you can do more damage than you've been dealing. You could push your luck a little bit more and perhaps become even better. There was also a need to think a few steps ahead. You couldn't just dodge roll an attack and continue as normal. And I think the Mantis Lord's second phase illustrates this point best. In first phase, you fight only one mantis, while in second phase, you have to fight 2. Each mantis moves independent of the other, and during part of the fight, each one can attack from either above or along the platform you're on. Not only does this rush your movements so you can avoid both, but it also meant I had to not only see the attack coming and dodge it, but also position myself so I didn't get caught in a bad position for the next mantis's attack. Get too close to the edge, and I risk one of them landing on me before they even start their attack. You also had to carefully consider when you would try to heal and you had no room to hesitate, or else you'd get hit again. Another great part of Hollow Knight's boss battles and combat in general is that the hitboxes were very clear and easy to navigate. A lot of games will make you drift a little bit when you move around, but Hollow Knight is very twitchy with its movements, so you can move with, well, great precision, and now I feel like I've used that word so many times that it doesn't feel like a word anymore. Regardless, unlike other games, I felt confident when trying to thread the needle between different moves because I could easily tell where the hitboxes were and knew exactly where I could move. But that's enough on the bosses. Let's get back to the journey where I've discovered the Forgotten Crossroads is not the only place in the game. The first place I came to was Green Path, which meant I needed a new map. But I guess that's not that big of a deal since the map guy, yeah, I don't remember his name, is usually pretty close to each area's main entrance. Discovering that there were more locations to be found resulted in a pretty big boost of intrigue in the game, so I kept on wandering around until I came to Fog Canyon. This place annoys the heck out of me because I discovered it third, but the map guy is behind this black wall thing that you can't get past until much later in the game. I suppose there isn't much of a reason for you to spend any real time in Fog Canyon, but it was always that annoying empty spot on my map as I filled it out. Back in Green Path, you meet Hornet and have your first boss fight with her, though I kept forgetting her name and I always just called her Silk Song as I played. She's another one of my favorite bosses, maybe second to the Mantis Lords, though I would say I find her to be a pretty simple boss, or maybe just a little simpler than the other. I don't know. Defeating her also unlocks your very first ability, or at least the first one that I found, because I'm pretty sure you can do Hollow Knight in different orders, but I'm not sure. Regardless, I have a dash power, which was something I had been wishing for. It also made me curious as to what other abilities are out there. I think I didn't find hardly any of the abilities outside of the ones that are necessary for progression. I found some Wraith 1 and 2 that did something with this slash or great slash or whatever, but I never used either of these. But of course, there were ones that are necessary for progression, and this kind of irks me. Unlocking new abilities to progress in a game is totally normal, but there were many times as I wandered that I stumbled upon situations where I could tell I needed a special ability, but didn't have it. I'd then leave to try and find this ability, or discover a new path for progression and then forget that was there. Although, to be totally fair to the game, it does give you pins that you can put on your map for anything you think is interesting. I didn't use these as much as I should have, but I also know there were some areas that I didn't even know were important and thus didn't mark them, only to later discover that they were and have to go on a long journey to find it. There were also times when I didn't know where I could go or should go, and it was hard to tell which paths on the map were the ones blocked by progression and which ones I had been to before and which ones I should go to. I think in the end, this is mostly my own fault, but I was unaware of some of the barriers that would be erected as I played, and thus didn't prepare properly, resulting in way more backtracking than was preferable, I guess. I think I may have only played one of these Metroidvanias before. Granted, if I understand Metroidvanias correctly, there is quite often a bit of backtracking. I think I may have only played one Metroidvania before, and there was a good amount of it, but that was often just while I was tracing a line of progression rather than scrambling to figure out what hidden wall I missed. So the game gives you the tools to deal with these hurdles, but as a new player, I wasn't entirely sure when or how to use them to my advantage. Now, since we've been derailed from the main journey, let's just take a quick look at the NPCs in this game. None of them have a whole lot of dialogue, which makes me happy, and a lot of storytelling is told subtly and succinctly. There also, from my experience, wasn't exactly a narrative going on, just some cryptic undertones to the whole ordeal. But as I've mentioned in videos before, I don't pay hardly any attention to the stories in games, so maybe I just skipped over to the dialogue that would have made a more obvious narrative. But the NPCs were pretty interesting because, for one, they were good atmosphere and had great sound design. But also, some of them are just helpful, like the one who upgrades your weapon, the one who you can sell little trinkets to and make some money, and the one who sells you lovely, lovely charms. But there's also very unhelpful NPCs who are out to scam you. I encountered the banker pretty early, but unfortunately, he was spoiled for me. Well, maybe that's fortunately. I already knew that he would steal my money if I gave it to him. I've been told he only does this after giving him a certain amount of money, but that's a dirty trick to play on a new player. But there's also this other guy who tells you he'll show you something shiny for money, and well, I just had to see what the shiny thing was. But then I didn't get to see it, which is very disappointing. There's also this wannabe warrior guy you save at least a time or two. I don't get him. I should just leave him down here. And finally, I wanted to mention Pizzo. I didn't understand this NPC. You kind of just find him randomly on your journey, and I always skipped his dialogue. But near the end of the run, I found his lifeless body, and that really struck me. He'd just been some random guy I largely ignored, but also knew because I encountered him several times, and now he was just dead. No fanfare, no explanation, he's just dead. Pretty sure he must have died while fighting in the Colosseum, since I saw him there before finding him dead. So if I hadn't gone there, maybe he'd still be alive? I don't know, but I guess he's a sacrifice I am willing to make, because the Colosseum was super fun. Does that make me a bad person? Yeah, probably. But hey, the Colosseum was a blast. Sorry, Tizzo, you will be missed. Now, we haven't hardly talked about any of the other locations in this game, but now I think is a good time to rapid fire each of the places I've skipped over. One of the more obnoxious places was the Deepnest. This area was not a fun place to be, especially since there aren't a whole lot of easy ways to get there, so once you're in, you're kind of stuck until you make a long journey out. Although, near the end of the game, when I'm supposed to be finding these dreamer guys, I came to this one room with a bench and a bunch of cultish looking guys. I saw webs on this bench and thought it was kind of suspicious, but what am I going to do? Not sit down? And then the cult guys start slowly moving towards you, and you discover that you're trapped on the bench. That's awesome! It's such a small thing, but it was also genuinely the scariest thing in this game so far. So for that alone, the Deepnest is fine in my book. There was the City of Tears, which was a lovely place, and once I got there, I seem to remember it being some sort of big deal in the game. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know, but it was nice. Plus I had one of my favorite enemies. There was the Ancient Basin, but I didn't spend a whole lot of time there, but there was this fountain you could give all your money to, and near the end of the game, the basin gets a lot creepier with these soul enemies attacking you, and I genuinely felt like I was killing the souls of my fallen comrades, so that's great. There's the Fungal Waste, which only had one good thing, the Mantis Village. Otherwise, it was just in the way and not that interesting. There's Crystal Peak, which I thought looked cool, but there wasn't much going on there. The Crossroads at some point got infected, and I'm not sure there's a point to that other than being a bit more difficult, which it does successfully. I found the Hive at one point, and it was a funny place to be in. There's several sub-biomes or locations or whatever they're called, but it'd take too long to go over each of them individually, and I'm not entirely sure what I'd even say about all of them. And we've already talked about most of the interesting parts in each of them anyways. I'm sure you're curious at this point though as to which ending I got, because apparently Hollow Knight has multiple endings. As you play the game, there are 3 markers on your map indicating where these 3 Dreamer guys are, and once you take all 3 of them down, the door to the Black Egg can be opened. Yeah! Yeah! Get some. All right. 1 at 100. Start. Shrimanamon the teacher. Now, I am a guy who plays games pretty linearly, so when I was presented with what looked like an open boss door, I figured that was the next logical step to take. Part of me was pretty sure that it'd end the game, and the other part of me was considering checking out what was beyond the other black walls I had come across. Half of me then expected this boss to be the final boss, and half of me thought it was just another stepping stone that'd lead me to further exploration. So let's talk about the final boss. First of all, it actually took me way longer than it should have to free this guy. I kept seeing the glowing things on the chains, and I thought to myself, surely I'm supposed to attack the glowing things, and didn't even bother trying to hit the base of the chains. So that was a rough start, but once he's free, you're shown that he's the Hollow Knight. And that's sad. I thought I was. Oh well. And that, on top of him being a rather intimidating looking boss, had me fired up for a good fight. But then the unexpected happened. The fight itself was sort of hard, sure, but at one point he starts doing, well, this, and it's disturbing. Bro, you good? See, a boss doing this to himself really caught me off guard, and part of me was wondering if I was doing something wrong. And then as the fight progressed, he would actually slow down at times and do these attacks which were slow and desperate, like a man holding on for dear life, waving his sword around in a desperate attempt to slay his foe. It all felt wrong, and for the first time in any game, I actually considered intentionally losing or searching for some alternative way to end the battle. I didn't want to keep on attacking the Hollow Knight. I didn't want to finish him off, but this is a game, and I'm pretty sure I can't put down my sword and make peace, so I beat him first try. Not to brag. Congratulations, Hollow Knight. I've never felt bad about beating up a boss before. Well, maybe once before. Oh my goodness. And this brief animation plays, which seems to indicate that I have now become the Hollow Knight and will be imprisoned just as he had been. I don't fully know how to respond to this. It was creepy and weird, and instead of feeling a great victory upon completing the game, I instead felt uneasy and like I had done something wrong. And maybe that's what they were going for with this game. Was I the bad guy all along? That's one ending, 4 more to go. After the credits, I was told I'd completed 50% of the game, whatever that means, in about 15 hours. And 57% was a whole lot lower than I thought it would be. I thought I had done a good job at exploring, but I guess I had pretty clear evidence I hadn't, since I had like no charms, none at all. I couldn't find these things anywhere. Now, what would I say about Hollow Knight? Well, I think it's a pretty great game, and I can see why there's so much love for it. It looks beautiful, handles great, and all the mechanics are very well executed. I would definitely see myself returning to this someday, and I'm excited for Silksong to release, although who knows when that'll happen with the whole Unity debacle. Maybe something will change by the time this video releases, and you can let me know if things have in the comments. I also don't know how I feel about games having multiple endings. Part of me likes it because it adds a lot of replayability, and part of me hates because I don't get the ending I want or even the most interesting ending that's available, and oftentimes, unless someone tells me, I don't even know there are other endings. You could say I just have to replay the game, but I intentionally play these games blind because I want to experience them exactly as they're presented to the player without some outside influence. If nobody had told me, I would never have known there were multiple endings. If I did play the game again, it's not unlikely I'd end up doing a lot of the same things too. Perhaps I would explore more, especially what's beyond the other black barriers, which could potentially have led to other endings, but I don't know. All I know is I've been left with a rather sad ending. I've been told by some that I need to experience the whole game, and I need to go back and get the quote proper or true ending. Maybe someday I will do that, but when making these videos, I'm only interested in exactly what happening, with no outside influence and giving my thoughts on that. The point of these videos isn't to discuss every aspect of a game or tell you what all is in them because, well, most of you probably already have played these games and already know these things. What I am trying to do is give my perspective on these games as someone who knows nothing about these popular titles and has no nostalgia for them, and thus can hopefully give an unbiased or hopefully fresh perspective on what these games are. And since I approach the game the way I do with no research and doing only the things that I feel like doing, I hope to give the perspective of the average person and how they see these games, rather than another guy who knows all the ins and outs or is particularly good at one thing or another. All that to say, I got the ending that I got, and that's it. The journey ends, and that's where my view of the game ends as well. Sure, I could replay it, and I might, but I think there's value in sharing first impressions. All in all, I would give Hollow Knight a solid 9 out of 10, and the 8 to 9 range is probably where most of the popular games I'm going to be playing are going to be because, well, they're popular for a reason. So maybe there isn't even a point in giving them these rankings, but I'm going to keep on doing so that way one day I can have a really hot take. But Hollow Knight was great, and I'm glad I got to try it, so let me know if there's any other popular games I should try next. If I haven't already made a video on it, I almost certainly haven't tried it, so go wild, and thanks for watching.